Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm YamatoCannon, you're at my channel. I wanted to make some smaller, shorter content pieces that are much easier to digest for those people that don't want to listen to hours of unedited footage where I repeat myself over and over because I get asked the same question over and over. Nevertheless, I wanted to make a small video about the precedent and the situation at the World Championship and how different it is in comparison to other years, and touch on a couple of topics that sometimes don't get discussed enough, but it's important to know heading into a World Championship. The first one I wanted to address is Scrim Leaks. So I get a lot of questions about Scrim Leaks and the impact of those scrims. There are certain lobbies that don't get finished because they don't have TR accounts currently over in China where the teams are boot camping and practicing. They finish the lobby because maybe it's bugged or something, and the Nexus explodes and the match history is recorded. While scrims matter to some degree, the results usually don't. The purpose of scrims is to practice some things that you are sometimes bad at, sometimes it's to build confidence, sometimes teams try hard very much, sometimes teams try hard less. And this is important to keep in mind because I get asked over and over again, what do you think about this result? What do you think about this result? This team beat this team in one Scrim League. Are they now better than them? And even though, the only information it really gives is what the teams might potentially play. Like, oh, they practice this. That's a huge tell, right? For example, we had the situation with Hekarim and Speaker. He didn't play it before. And then he dropped it, of course, on the scrim that showed up where he went 15 kills and they eventually won a game, right? So with that being said, scrims only reveal what teams have practiced. The results shouldn't matter to anyone. It is exciting to talk about, and I think that's why a lot of people are latching onto it, but it's not enough to shift opinions. I can tell you this, in Sandbox we beat Top Esports in scrims. In Sandbox we beat Down1 in scrims, but that doesn't necessarily translate to us playing against them in an official match because the stakes are very different. When we faced Down1 in the LCK, we got smacked on our head 4 games in a row. Nevertheless, we continue to the next point that I wanted to bring up, the world situation. So this year has been crazy for many reasons, we are very fortunate. I am very fortunate that League of Legends continued on the competitive side of things. I had to quarantine before Korea. We played at LOL Park for the longest time, and then the last match that we played against Hanwha Live, we played from home. And I am speaking from experience here that the shift from going from LOL Park into playing from home is massive because you associate things, smells, visuals, audio, everything around you associate with specific mindsets. Being at the LOL Park was very easy to associate that thought process with, we are competing now, serious mode is on, the smells and the visuals there and the car drive, all the parts of the process are definitely, part of putting yourself in that mindset where you're competing. We played against Hanwha Live, and I noticed that, just because we are doing it in the practice room, I had to try extra hard to convey the mode of seriousness, and I had to raise the stakes for the players in an almost artificial way. We made sure to remodel the room, and we made some, key changes to make sure that it does indeed feel different in comparison to the practice day before. But I'm telling you this story because all of these things can change performance. Right now, coming into the World Championship, players are doing things, even though they're experienced, they're doing very unorthodox things. We have players that have been to the World Championship many times, but this year is going to be very different. There's not going to be any monstrous crowd. The crowds are enormous at World Championship events, and I imagine if we played in the venues that they had planned in China, the venues are going to be absolutely crazy packed, and it will be crazy loud, and this affects players. This affects anyone, honestly, and I say affects because I don't want to say that it affects people negatively, because for some people it affects them positively. Some players play better, some players play worse, some players also are completely unaffected. It is just another variable that depends on who you're talking with, right? So this is only one part of it. And then there's the quarantine portion of it. The LPL teams, as I understand it, they didn't have to quarantine. And quarantining is something that also some people struggle to deal with. I can only speak from experience. For me, it was kind of easy. It was kind of easy because I had access to good food and I could choose from what I wanted to eat. And the Korean delivery system is just so broken. But my excitement of working with the team and knowing what I could do and planning and always being in this motion with what's coming made it a lot easier. Made it a lot easier. And those 2 weeks went by like a breeze. I kept my sanity and I made sure that I exercised and moved around. And always when I was watching scrims, I was standing up while doing it to make sure that I have some sense of exercise. And this was how I dealt with it, right? For me, it was easy, but for some players, it's going to be hard. For some people, that it can break you to be in a room closed in, and sometimes, the food options in China maybe not be ideal for you, and this is going to impact your performance too. Especially with some teams, like the best example is G2, when they made this whole 1 year plan to make sure that they peak at the World Championship, right? And it's tricky when you make a whole 1 year plan and, you went caps with the AD carry in spring and then you went perks back to summer and then they took it easy in summer and they had some issues and so forth. I don't want to go too deep into it, but if you make a plan in G2's mind, they were at the finals last year, their mind is that we want to top that. We don't care about the ADC that much. Winning it is a plus, but we want to focus on that. And running into this situation where the World Championship looks so different might, stir up some issues in those plans. And I'm sure a lot of other teams are viewing this way too. Once again, for some teams this can be positive, for some teams it can be bad, for some teams it can be worse, for some teams it can be better. And that's why I'm not mentioning this, because I think this is a year where we can expect some crazy results. I think this is the year where teams don't have, there is experience that matters, but no one really has this experience of playing in a situation and a world that is this unique. So I'm saying this because looking at the playing teams are getting better and better, right? This is the time for an upset for all teams, because there are so many crazy variables that some teams might not deal with as good as in a normal case, because you know exactly what you're heading into. And I noticed one thing, like for example, Rogue, they were exercising on Zoom together, and there are ways to make this easier, and whoever is handling it better is going to have an edge. And that's important to note down. I mentioned the playing teams. I think coming into this year, as a third point, playing teams are quite exciting. Quite exciting because even though some of these playing regions don't have the largest player bases, culture also have a great impact on what kind of level of players that you produce. I had the honor of working with a Middle Eastern team, and I worked with 5 Middle Eastern players, and they play on EU West with terrible ping. They play on EU West with terrible ping, and a lot of them got, Challenger. A lot of them got Challenger, and that to me is impressive in itself. And I watched the final, and I was playing this tournament called LoL Nexus Arabia, and we were there, and I was watching the finals, and we were not in the finals, but nevertheless, there are some quality players. But the circumstances for a lot of players that are in the Middle East are just not good, because there's no server. There's no server. They have to play on EOS, and they have to, fight additional resistance. And the reason there's no server is because the player base is not big enough to justify it. And I think there's some infrastructure problems as well that need to be dealt with. Nevertheless, there's no server. Still, I could imagine that there are, players in this sphere of the world that can do good just based off of my anecdotal evidence. And the key thing here is some playing regions are also well connected to the highest level of gameplay. When we look at Japan, they don't have the biggest player base either, but they're right there next to Korea and China, and they can scrim with these teams and learn from these teams and play also on the Korean server. This matters too. A good example from traditional sports is Dagestan, the place of birth for Khabib, who is currently, the UFC, I don't know which weight class champion, but there's a lot of fighters that come from this city an absurd percentage of people that are born in this city come out of the city as like a top level fighter, right? So even though player base matters and how many people you have in a country or in a specific server, that matters and helps you out a lot. I think playing teams, these playing regions, these wildcard regions, they are getting the infrastructure, they're building slowly, and some of these issues that they've had in the past that, for example, I had in Europe back in season 1 and 2, no gaming house, PC issues, shitty organizations. This is also ramping up, and we'll begin to see, a massive improvement in these regions, especially the ones that are closely tied to other major regions. You could look at, for example, the Turkish teams. I've scrimmed against the Turkish teams many times during my time in Europe, and this is important to note, right? To contrast this, LPO, why China is so strong right now is because they have the biggest player base, they have the most amount of money, and they have the biggest viewership. All of the key pieces of what we're looking at is right there, but it doesn't mean that, regions with smaller play bases are doomed, because I think culture has an impact, and I think there's a lot of examples of, certain areas in the world that have like a specific niche, expertise in a specific area, like, this area is producing this many fighters, or this area is producing this many tennis players. And, I think with time, playing teams are going to get better and better. And sometimes, playing teams also lose players to other regions. We saw that happen with Oceania and North America. But I'm just saying, pay attention to the playing regions. They were going to get better, and considering the situation with the whole World Championship, I think this is a time for upsets. Another thing that people don't mention, which is going to be my last point as well, is the group draw happens, right? And considering it's best of one, that also brings an element of RNG. But that RNG is not new, right? That has been the case since forever. Best of ones bring this excitement where, even let's say Damwon had like an 80% chance to beat Sandbox. Let's say that 20% will, with a larger volume of games that need to be won, that 20% is just going to look smaller and smaller, right? And in best of ones, that RNG is in effect, and something can go wrong in a draft. You do one mistake in a draft, or you do one big mistake in the game, especially with the nature of League of Legends at the current, in the current state of things. There is a clear chance that you might just win one best of one. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're better. So there's an RNG element to that too. And also with how the group draw pans out, your first seed, you can be second seed. You can have a worse group as a first seed than in comparison to a second seed. And now, looking at Damwon and JDG being in the same group, those are teams that are quite evenly matched, right? JDG almost took the finals against Top Esports. Almost, of course, is arguable, but you get my point. Imagine now a world where Damwon gets second place in this group because they drop a best of one against JDG, and then they maybe lose a tiebreaker, and then Top Esports top their group, and all of a sudden, two teams that could be considered, contenders for the title might be facing each other already in quarters, which is crazy, right? Which is absolutely crazy. You have a world where potentially you have Damwon facing Top Esports in quarterfinals already, right? And that's something also important to point out, that the tournament system is not perfect, right? It's not perfect. But these are just some initial thoughts that you can kind of chew on, a little Yamato snack, a little Yamato information that you can, digest. I'm going to break down the teams from the major regions to the best of my ability in a short condensed video for those people who prefer to not watch long amount of content and just want to hear like, oh, what should I expect from these regions? More like an entry level type ordeal for the average viewer that doesn't want to, do all that research. All right, so that's coming up next. We'll do it when I have time. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Please leave some feedback on if you enjoyed this video or not. If you like this type of content, please subscribe, hit the like, because that helps me a lot. It's actually absurd how much of a difference leaving likes actually makes. So yeah, please do so if you want to support the channel. That's all I ask. I'm happy that you're watching it in the first place, so you made it this far. I wish you all the best. If you sneeze during the video, bless you and bless your face.